Before we start today's video, we want to bring you a word from our sponsor, Babbel. Personally, I love languages, but based on my marks in high school French class, I've never really been good with them. And a lot of days I struggle with English, which is my native tongue. But then I found Babbel, which has been incredibly helpful. It makes learning a new language not only easy, but fun. They teach you everyday language that you'll use in actual conversations. Their secret is that all their lessons were created by language experts who have taught their native language to people of all different levels. There's so many reasons to learn a new language. For example, it can be a tremendous advantage when applying for a job or a promotion. It can also make traveling in a different country much easier. Or learning a new language is a fun hobby that can keep your mind sharp. Personally, I wanted to connect with some extended family in the Netherlands, which is where my father's family came from. I also want to travel there one day when I get time to take some vacation. So when I get there and someone asks, "Will ye ra hagen juice?" I'll be able to say, "Nee dank u." Or they ask, "Will ye bitterballen?" And I'll say, "Ja graag." Babbel is great because they have so many different ways to learn. They have speech recognition, live classes, podcasts, and my favorite, games. The games are a lot of fun, and they're an interesting way to learn how to use certain words and phrases. Right now is the best time to try Babbel because they have an amazing offer for criminally listed viewers. You can get 30% off 6 months, 12 months, or lifetime access. To get this amazing deal, click on the link below this video. Learn a new language in just 3 weeks using Babbel. Number 3. Zachary Bernhardt. Clearwater is on the west coast of Florida. It's about 20 miles from downtown Tampa. In 2000, it was home to about 108,000 people. This included Lisa Hackett and her 8-year-old son, Zachary Bernhardt. They lived in an apartment complex in the city. Hackett usually worked nights, but on the night of September 11, 2000, she was at home doing chores. She was trying to stay awake all night to ensure that Zachary got off to school in time. She stayed up all night, and then, in the morning, she tried to stay awake to ensure that Zachary got off to school on time. At some point that morning, she left for a short walk. She didn't lock the apartment door behind her when she left. When she returned to the apartment, she discovered that 8-year-old Zachary was gone. Hackett immediately called her sister in a panic. Her sister suggested that he was hiding as a prank, but Hackett couldn't find him. At 5 a.m., Zachary was reported missing. The police looked around the apartment. There were no signs of a break-in or forced entry. There were also no signs of a struggle or violence in the home. Besides Zachary, nothing was missing from the apartment. The police thought it was unlikely that he left on his own accord. He didn't take anything with him, and he didn't have a working bike. Massive searches for the 8-year-old boy were conducted. There was a wooded area behind his apartment complex, and that was searched. Hundreds of volunteers helped. The police used helicopters and cadaver dogs, but nothing was found in the days after Zachary went missing. But the searches for him continued for several months. 4 months after his disappearance, 6 detectives were working full-time on the case. They followed up on over 700 leads and tips, but it led them nowhere. To this day, the police don't know if Zachary was kidnapped or if he ran away. They also don't know if he's dead or alive. If he was kidnapped and or murdered, the police do not have a suspect in the case. There's still an active Amber Alert on Zachary. It's the longest active Amber Alert in Florida. Zachary's family has never stopped searching for him, and they hope he is still alive. If he is still alive at the time of this recording, Zachary Bernhardt would be 30 years old. Number 2. Rosie Tapia. On the night of August 13, 1995, 6-year-old Rosie Tapia was being babysat by her 18-year-old sister, Amelia Azalando. The family lived in a basement unit in an apartment complex in Salt Lake City, Utah. Rosie's mother, Rosie Tapia, went out dancing with her husband. They returned home at about 2:30 a.m. and Louine checked on the room Rosie shared with her twin 4-year-old siblings. She kissed them and then closed the window, but left it open a crack. She was worried that closing the window the entire way would wake up the children. She then drew the blinds. She left the bedroom with the door open. At 4:30 a.m., Louine woke up and noticed that the kids' bedroom door was almost closed. She opened the door and she was shocked by what she saw. The window was wide open and the screen wasn't in the window frame. The screen was later found on the ground outside the window. Also, 6-year-old Rosie was gone. Louine immediately called the police. Rosie's family got out of bed and searched the neighborhood for her. A few hours after Rosie was reported missing, a man was jogging with his dog near the Jordan River, just blocks from the family's apartment. He found the dead body of a young girl who was later identified as Rosie. She had been sexually assaulted and drowned. The police searched the apartment for clues. One problem they had was that they weren't sure if the kidnapper entered the home or if Rosie crawled out on her own. Unfortunately, despite the best efforts of the police, no arrests were made. Shortly after Rosie's murder, her family made an unusual discovery. On her grave was a Barbie doll. The family collected the doll and brought it home with them. They are unsure who left it. It could have been left by a sympathetic stranger, or a child may have accidentally dropped it there. But it could have also been left by the killer. So the family kept it with them. In 2019, tests were conducted on the doll to see if any useful forensic evidence was on it. It has never been made public if anything was found on the doll, and Rosie Tapia's murder remains unsolved. Tragically, in 2020, Rosie's sister, Amelia, who was babysitting on the night she was kidnapped, died from an illness. She was 43 years old. It's been 27 years since Rosie's murder, and her family, especially her mother, Louine, still hold out hope that the case will be solved. Number 1. Monica DaSilva. September 23, 1990 was a Sunday night. That night, Julia DaSilva and her 2 kids, Monica and James, watched a movie in their apartment in Reno, Nevada. They lived on the main floor of an apartment complex. When the movie ended, 7-year-old Monica DaSilva went to bed. Her mother and younger brother had fallen asleep on the couch. The next morning, Monica's father, Michael Crane, went to get her out of bed. Although Monica had her mother's last name, Michael was her biological father. Julia and Michael were not married. Michael was shocked to find out that Monica was not in her bedroom. The police were immediately called. Monica's bedroom window was open. The window screen had been pried open and scuff marks were found outside the window. A search dog was brought to the apartment and they picked up Monica's scent, but only led the police to her school and the police station. Sadly, it wasn't long before the case went cold. The police said they had several suspects, including Monica's parents. Michael and Julie were adamant that they had nothing to do with their daughter's disappearance. For nearly a year, there was no progress on the case. Then, on September 4th, 1991, the police made a shocking announcement. Monica's remains had been found, but they had not been found recently. They were found over 10 months earlier in a canyon in Lockwood, Nevada, about 10 miles from Monica's home. On October 14, 1990, just 3 weeks after Monica went missing, a family was hiking in the canyon when they came across the partial skeletal remains of a young girl. The medical examiner thought that based on the state of the remains, the girl had been dead for at least 6 months to 2 years. The police concluded that it could not have been Monica's remains because she had only been missing for 3 weeks. Monica's family had previously lived in Washington State, and the Rio Police Department requested Monica's dental records from the state. They came in March 1990, but there was an oversight, and the dental records weren't compared to the remains. In August, a special task force was looking at the cases of missing and murdered children in Nevada, and they noticed the oversight. So the dental records were compared, and it was determined it was a match. Another medical examiner said that animals must have caused the damage to the body to make it look more decomposed than it actually was. Due to the state of the remains, the cause of death could not be determined. But unfortunately, identifying the remains did not lead to any suspects. After the murder of their daughter, Michael and Julie got married, and Julie took on the last name Crane. In 1992, Monica's parents sued the Rio Police Department for violating their civil rights by naming them as suspects. But in 1994, the suit was dismissed because the case was still ongoing. In 1997, they filed another lawsuit. In April 1997, a detective said they were 90% exonerated as suspects. In January 1998, the city of Reno and the Cranes agreed to an out-of-court settlement. The city paid them $37,500. Throughout the years, suspects would emerge and they would be investigated. In March 1997, a man named John Brewer Eustace III kidnapped a 2-year-old girl from a ground-level apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, and sexually assaulted her. The girl was left alive. Eustace turned himself into the police 6 days later. Eustace was a drifter, so the police thought he possibly killed Monica DaSilva and Rosie Tapia, whose case we covered in the last entry. The police thought he may have also committed 2 other murders. One happened on April 2, 1994. 7-year-old Diane Henderson lived with her family in Las Vegas, Nevada. On April 2, 1994, Diane went Easter shopping with her sisters and mother. Diane ran ahead while her mother and sisters stopped to pay rent at their apartment complex's office. When they went to their apartment, Diane was gone. The box she was carrying was found discarded. The next day, her body was found in a cardboard box in a dumpster in the apartment complex. She had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and asphyxiated. Another murder where he was a person of interest was the Christmas night 1996 murder of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey. When Eustace surrendered, he had an article about Ramsey's murder on him, but he was quickly eliminated as a suspect in that murder. The police were never able to prove that Eustace was in the other cities when the girls were murdered, so he was never charged with murder. Instead, he pleaded guilty to kidnapping for the case in Charlotte. In January 1998, he was sentenced to a maximum of 99 years in prison. He'd have to serve a minimum of 80 years before he was paroled. Since he was 32 years old when he was sentenced, it seems unlikely he'll live to apply for parole. In July 2013, another suspect emerged. The police in Ozark, Missouri, arrested a 62-year-old man named Jasper Everett Goddard. He was stopped at a routine traffic stop, and the police realized there was a warrant for his arrest. His DNA had recently been linked to a 1986 murder that was similar to Monica's murder. On November 23, 1986, nearly 4 years before Monica was killed, Catherine Rhodes, who was recently divorced, took her 10-year-old son, Thomas, and her 7-year-old daughter, April, to the drive-in movie theater. They returned to the Las Vegas apartment, and Catherine put both kids to bed. They shared one bedroom in their ground-level apartment. The next morning, Catherine and Thomas realized that April wasn't in the apartment. A search for her was conducted. Her dead body was found in a storage unit of an abandoned apartment building close to her home. She had been sexually assaulted and beaten to death with a cinder block. For a while, the police had suspected that the same man killed April and Monica. So in 2009, they asked for DNA from April's case to be compared to Monica's case. The Las Vegas Review-Journal said both the cases were not definitively linked. But the article doesn't explain why. One possibility is that there may not be any DNA evidence for Monica's crime scene because her remains were in such bad shape. Nevertheless, the police entered April's killer's DNA into CODIS, and they got a match to a registered sex offender named Jasper Everett Goddard. Goddard had served 4 years in prison in Missouri for raping an 8-year-old girl. In January 2019, Goddard pleaded guilty to killing 7-year-old April Rhodes. But Goddard died a month later from natural causes at the age of 67. The police still believe that he's a strong suspect in Monica DaSilva's case. There are several similarities between the two cases. Both girls were 7 years old. They both lived in apartments on the main floor, and they were kidnapped in the middle of the night from their beds. But the police have never been able to connect Goddard to Monica's murder. If Goddard killed Monica, he took that secret to the grave with him. Also, in 2009, another case we discussed this entry was solved. In 2009, 15 years after the murder of 7-year-old Diane Hernandez, the police arrested 36-year-old Gregory Wallen. Diane was killed in April 1994 in Las Vegas. Wallen was a neighbor who lived in the same apartment complex. Wallen had been arrested in 1992 in Pahrump, Nevada for sexual assault, which is why his DNA was on file. It took Wallen 10 years to go to trial for Diane's murder. He then agreed to plead guilty in exchange for life in prison instead of getting the death penalty. The police have not said if they have investigated Wallen in connection with Monica's murder. At the time of this video, the murder of 7-year-old Monica DaSilva is considered cold. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please don't forget to check out our new channel, Paranormally Listed. There's a link on the screen now, and there's a link in the description box below this video. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.